Ja, vielen Dank, Conny, für diese.
Thank you very much, Connie, for this lovely introduction and presentation. First off, congratulations to the Big Art team for the initiative and for organizing this event. But also many thanks for the great assistance prior to the conference. This is an issue that the team of Public Arts Lower Austria is something we are confronted with on an everyday basis. But it's also something where we have not really reflected upon on a larger scale, which is why I'm very excited to be here today to provide some insights into our daily work and our experience. I will also provide a lot of input and inspiration, and I will certainly receive it from the other speakers and the audience. For more than 30 years, artistic projects in outdoor spaces have been implemented through the Art Promotion Unit for Art in Public Space Lower Austria. We act as advisors, promoters, and mediators. We announce competitions with project partners and a panel of experts and accompany the implementation of jury-reviewed projects. We work with municipalities, institutions, and associations, as well as other departments of the province of Lower Austria. As of today, there are about 300 different permanent works throughout Lower Austria on squares, in schools, on fields, even inside ponds. Of these, 140 are owned by the province and are thus the direct responsibility of the state, and roughly 160 are owned by municipalities. There's also a large number of temporary projects that we won't be discussing today. The installation sites and contexts are as different as the shapes, materials, and approaches chosen by the artists. This has led to a long-lasting enrichment of the cultural landscape in Lower Austria and obviously fills us with great joy. At the same time, the number of projects also poses manifold challenges with regard to their maintenance and restoration. As I mentioned before, a large part of the work is owned by the municipalities. However, our institution, our agency, sees itself as responsible for the documentation, communication, and maintenance of all the works that have been created in a joint process. The many individual projects are seen as part of a kind of collection, so to speak, and we endeavor to look after community and convey them accordingly. We support the communities with restorations, both in an advisory capacity and financially, and we strive for consultation and exchange between artists, restoration teams of the province's collections, external experts, and local representatives. There is no separate budget for renovations, and this is an ever-growing challenge for our team. As the title implies, it is not only time that gnaws at the works in outdoor space. Wind and weather, as well as other external stresses such as exhaust fumes and salts or mechanical effects, take their toll. The same is true for our evolving perception and design and the use of urban spaces, as well as landscape spaces, which lead to changes in outdoor art projects. Also, artistic practices also change. The materials and techniques used evolve and oftentimes have to adapt to the conditions of outdoor space. In short, public art and the spaces and places it refers to are in a constant state of flux, which has a corresponding effect on their maintenance and preservation. In the following, I would like to present very different projects. The focus is not so much on classical restorative issues. Rather, the aim is to convey that works can be destroyed or that their original appearance can be altered in very different, sometimes unexpected ways, and to create awareness of the issues that arise from this for the maintenance, but also for the possible removal of works of art.
beginnen.
Now, I would like to begin with two works where the material is the main point of interest. The social sculpture Drinking Water by Miecha Botric consisted exclusively of materials that have been tested outdoors and are in widespread use. And yet, the work had to be removed after 8 years. In 2009, Botric erected the installation Drinking Water in the park of Grafeneck Castle. In order to provide refreshment for walkers in a remote part of the park, the artist developed a self-sustaining, self-contained system that mimics nature. Rainwater is collected on site underneath wooden planks and surrounded by benches. It is cooled and purified via deeper layers of earth, and the water then feeds a water fountain. The energy for the water purification is generated by a photovoltaic system. Unfortunately, it turned out that the wooden planks did not allow enough water to collect in the tank. In exchange with the artists, the adaptation of the surface was carried out. Part of the wood was replaced with a metal grid. Unfortunately, this did not improve matters, as the installed funnel was repeatedly clogged by leaves of surrounding trees. In order to still be able to provide water at this location, the water was filled directly into the water container. Since the quality of the water was questioned during the annual survey in 2017, we decided to remove the installation in consultation with the artist and the park management. The reason for this removal in this case was not the material itself, but the fact that the original concept wasn't put into practice. A different situation regarding the sculpture Daphne by Ines Dujak, which was erected in 2008 by the pond near the entrance to the Garden Tool grounds, which is a garden exhibit. This sculpture has very delicate elements such as a lace skirt and fingers that turn into laurel leaves, was created from a blend of silicone and plaster. Daphne, who is taking a break while fleeing from Apollo, sits on a lined wooden chair that seems to stand flush, as if on water. Since its installation, the sculpture has been restored 3 times. Especially the delicate parts are always badly damaged or broken off. For instance, the branches with leaves. The helix on the side is bleached out by the sunlight. And there is a reflection of the water too. All in all, the white sculpture gets dirty very quickly, not least by algae deposits in the bottom part. In general, it can be said that the design of the sculpture is not ideal for outdoor use by the water, but it was still possible to preserve the body of the sculpture and to always present it in its original appearance after winter breaks and restorative measures. In this context, another example that we have been dealing with, the Sound Atoll is almost a quarter of a century old, and together with 4 other works, is part of the Pasdorf cultural landscape. It was done by Sorm and Kaprine, artist team. In an artificial earthen dam, visitors can experience an acoustic portrait of the area. For many years, technology was a problem, or rather it was a victim of vandalism on several occasions. In the meantime, however, the earthen dam and the space around it have also changed, primarily through erosion but also through overgrowth. After several inspections and in-depth consultations with the artists, the former landscape planner and the municipality, we had decided to overhaul the installation. In addition to updating the technology, the reconstruction of the earthen dam is the main focus. I lead this team, I manage it, and it's scheduled to be completed by the summer of 2022, this restoration, and we want to create new awareness for this cultural landscape and encourage people to actively participate in the care of the landscape. Starting in the fall of this year, after my field mass, selected guests were invited to a tour of the area to explore the history of the project, its change, and the possible future. Let's turn to a work of art that, for me, questions the classical categories of permanent and temporary, and which takes a familiar element of the outdoor space, the birdhouse, as its starting point. And yet, it is not fully compatible with the requirements of outdoor space. Claudia Merzendorfer conceived and implemented the community project for the birds in 2019 on the occasion of the 20th anniversary of the social psychiatric department at the regional hospital of Ocherbrunn. She invited more than 40 artists, architects, musicians, and other people to each build a birdhouse, either as a feeding or breeding space, which was then installed in the garden of the regional hospital. Thus, an aeronautical sculpture garden was created, as the artist herself calls it. In this picture, you can see all the contribution when they were still in the atelier, in the workshop. The birdhouses are very different from each other, some very delicate, some intended to serve as food for birds. Some of them address their own decay, like a house made of love letters. Over the winter of 2020, 5 houses were removed, either because they broke or because the fastenings came loose. Wherever possible, these were then repaired or reinstalled in the spring. And 2 were unfortunately completely destroyed beyond repair. But one of them is actually used as a nesting place for birds. The number of houses will certainly decrease considerably in coming months. At the same time, the artist is planning to commission new houses and thus to operate not only an aeronautical but also a sculpture garden that will change over time, but which will nevertheless dissolve before our eyes over the years. Overall, this work requires care from the hospital staff, the artist herself, and from us, which I consider to be very fitting, not least in view of the social psychiatric department and its anniversary. The following projects are not about changing the works of art themselves, but about changing their setting and their environment and how this affects the works of art. Let's stay at the Hellerbrunn Hospital. It is one of the few hospitals in which site-specific art projects were implemented in 1992, in addition to art purchases. This includes 3 designs for common areas. These can be seen in their original use in the black and white photographs. More than 10 years ago, due to a severe lack of space, the common areas were converted into patients' rooms. Unfortunately, this information was not shared with our agency. It was only during stock taking that we became aware of the situation, which is ideal neither for the art nor for the patients. We talked to the hospital management, and it will soon be clarified to what extent the works will be repositioned in a newly created room or, if necessary, integrated into the collections of the state of Lower Austria. On the campus of Danube University Krems, numerous art projects were installed both indoors and outdoors as the old tobacco factory was adapted. In 2003, media installations by Gerda Lampalzer and Dara Birnbaum were installed in 2 transitional spaces that open up between the staircase and the corridors of the side wings. Both were removed at the request of the university and integrated into the collection of the state. The reason is that the room where the works are placed is no longer used as a kind of lobby for the department, but more as a common area and for events. The moving images and the sound were perceived as inappropriate, and the monitors were not even turned on. Therefore, it was no longer possible to experience these installations as they were originally intended. Here, of course, the question arises as to the willingness and the effort of integrating art into a business, into a community. This willingness must be present on site. When staff or responsibilities change, knowledge about the background of the artworks can be lost, as in the case of the aforementioned hospital. But also we can see in the case of Danube University the willingness willingness to integrate art can change. Another interesting aspect in relation to Dara Birnbaum and her works of art as new insights into the structure of the work emerged during the preparation for the dismantling and the transfer to the state collection. We realized in consultation with the artist that there was actually a misunderstanding about the color itself for these works of art. The artist's percentages in relation to the color mixture was interpreted as a change of colors, which led to the striped application. But the idea was actually a blended color of two shades. We are now looking forward to implementing the artwork at a new location in its originally intended form. In the last example from this group, we were confronted with a situation that the artist, Klaus Weber, wanted to contractually stipulate the immutability of the surroundings. Klaus Weber erected the sculpture cover version on a peninsula in the riverside area of Tallinn. A larger-than-life replica of the small sculpture Monkey with Skull by sculptor Hugo Reinhardt from 1893 stands on a 50-square-meter concrete foundation. This sculpture was only to be made accessible by a trail created by the artist. Mr. Weber wanted nature to remain exactly as it was at the time of its realization, which could not be guaranteed as he wanted it. Tulln was severely affected by the ash tree dieback in 2017, and the area as a whole has changed. The trail was overgrown by nature, and interested people came to see the work mainly via the already existing forest roads. In essence, the artist wanted the place not to be developed for tourism and for people to discover it more or less by chance. And even though the Tulln Monkey, as it's called, now has achieved certain popularity, the place has still retained its special touch. But it will undoubtedly continue to change. But in this case, it is the art that is likely to remain the constant for several decades. Let us now turn to three works that are affected by the use people on site make of it. And the question arises as to how far these changes can go before they undermine the original form or even the subject matter aspect of the work. Regula Detweiler created a landscape with animals for the nursing home in Tulln. Art as artificial nature, but also as an important social offering. Puristically, as if from a construction kit, she equipped an area in the inner courtyard of the home and created landscapes of artifacts. She had model shelters for animals and two ponds and even imitations of Lake Chiemsee. These were the habitat of goats and rabbits and gray geese. At the same time, the area was to offer nursing home residents and neighboring families a field of activity and an opportunity for interaction and destruction. The prototypical is intended as a specification. Any needed change is defined as intentional by the artist. In part, this was done by the animals, in part of residents and the nursing staff. For a year, the artist repeatedly visited the grounds and made adjustments in an effort to keep the basic design comprehensible and to react to unforeseen events. For example, the site was used as a place to get rid of unwanted pets, and a hill was removed because the earth was needed for something else. Afterwards, the artist handed over the entire responsibility for maintaining and caring for the installation to the people in charge of the nursing home, so that today the aspect of the work as a communicative social place is the main aspect, and the formal aspect is mostly preserved in the documentation. The situation was different with Anita Leis's square design on the Donaulände area near Spitz. A tree, a street lamp, two trash cans, a bench, two concrete cuboids, and vehicle tracks. These elements were used by Anita Leis for her art in public space space project in Lower Austria, and they are as unspectacular as the title itself, Flood Protection Meadow. And the furnishings and in the name, the artist points to the surroundings and chooses a pragmatic approach to the task, creating an interplay of the familiar and the unfamiliar. During an on-site inspection after the linden tree had been blown down by a storm, it became apparent in 2020 that despite or perhaps because of the many references to the surrounding space, the square remained alien to the local population, who tried to turn it into something familiar for themselves. And we had the impression that the toned-down design had triggered a new design dynamics among the population. Curved wooden benches had been positioned on the seating platforms, a discarded barge had been placed in the area as a flower pot, and rose bushes had been planted. These changes were made without consulting the artists or us. In a subsequent joint decision was made to surrender the space and to hand it over to the municipality. It will no longer be listed as a work by Anita Leis. The whip lamp and the trash can sculptures were taken down, with one of them being restored and integrated into the province's collection. This was an example for well-intended change or adaptations of arts, but this is not to be underestimated. Something more that's more present in our awareness are intentional destruction and vandalism. As an example, let me mention one case that shows that is oftentimes mentioned, because this is a large issue, and a lot of people go to great lengths to attack works of art or to destroy them. At the park in Kaffeneck Castle, a ruin of a tower was created here by an artist. And inside the tower, he put a diorama of a dead animal, and that was also surrounded by other animals. Shortly after it was opened, somebody actually took the dead animal and put it into the earth, and then this person closed to the sculpture. So this was reversed, and a few elements such as the worms that were inside the animal's wounds were lost. Let me now mention another sculpture that works with Decay, which is also a critical commentary about the relationship between art and architecture, which is often becomes evident in this context. The Mexican artist Arturo Hernández Alcázar positioned parts of a trade fair hall that had previously been demolished in Wieselburg in front of the students' residence of the newly built vocational training school in Amstetten. The exhibit hall was built in 1971 using the popular construction method of solid reinforced concrete elements, and was torn down 45 years later. In front of the newly built vocational training school, whose building style resembles that of the exhibit hall, the artist's installation made the viewers aware of the future that is already present in the material, and it makes a critical commentary on the school's architecture. As a side note, it should be now noted that climbing plants, you can see that on picture, were planted around the sculpture by the school, probably in the hopes of making it disappear over time. In summary, looking at the projects presented and the many others we are working on, it is obvious to me that public space is in a constant state of flux, both as built space and as social and societal space. Art is part of these processes. It can inscribe itself in public spaces and assert itself there. It can produce short or longer-lasting shifts and expansions, but it can also fall victim to the ravages of the outdoor space. What's important for our work on all levels is exchanged with those responsible on site, not only in the case of damage, but as an ongoing communication process about the importance of care and maintenance of the works, as well as about the artist's background and reference. This will allow us to provide access to the concept behind those artworks, because there is power in the way people use a certain work of art, and be it only flower pots that are put up. Thank you very much for your attention.